This podcast is brought to you with limited interruption by Rudy Luther Toyota. Whether looking for an exciting brand new Toyota, a certified pre-owned vehicle, or getting quality routine maintenance and service for your vehicle, Rudy Luther Toyota is the place to go. Rudy Luther Toyota, the southeast corner of 394 and 169 in Golden Valley. Broadcasting live at AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota, in the evenings on WCPT 820 Chicago's Progressive Talk, and in the nighttime hours, 1150 AM KKNW in Seattle. It's the Matt McNeil Show on your Monday. Good to have you with us today. Guest free for the entire 2 hours today. It's nice to have you with us today. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Patrick is, of course, producing for us today. Hello, Patrick. Did you have a nice weekend?
Yeah, it was a pretty quiet weekend. Yeah, not a lot going on. How was your weekend?
It was nice. I got out into some of the... It is funny. I cannot do Halloween stuff prior to October 1st. I just can't. You see it, and I mean, I get it. Really, after the 4th of July, you start seeing Halloween stuff now in the stores because Halloween is a cash cow, man. They make a ton of money off Halloween. And I'm not going to deny, I love Halloween. I do. I forgot. I had kids, and I'd forgotten completely about how cool Halloween is. And then you have kids, and you're like, oh, that's right, candy. And I get to dress up. I get to dress up in costume. I got to go door to door. They give me candy. Oh, I remember why this is so awesome. But I still, I cannot immerse myself in the pumpkin spookiness aura or even really fall colors or anything until I get into October. And now that it is October this weekend, I went right in, cannonballed right into that pool this weekend, and went out and looked at pumpkins and spooky stuff. Well, spooky stuff for kids, but spooky stuff and fall colors and apples, orchards, and it was great fun. I hope you had a good weekend, no matter what you're doing, because obviously, at least for one of the things. It is remarkable we are still dealing with Hurricane Helene. And now we've got Milton. And Milton, I have never seen this happen in my life. I think it was early this morning. It went to a Category 1 hurricane. Earlier this morning. It all of a sudden jumped to a Category 4 at like 8 or 9 this morning. And now it's a Category 5 with 175-mile-an-hour winds at the center. There isn't a building made that will sustain those kinds of winds. There just isn't. 175-mile-an-hour winds, game over, man. You are scouring the earth clean, and it's headed right for Florida. Now, as I say that, I have looked at a lot of maps that have said, no, it's going to downgrade right before it hits Florida. We can only hope. But those were forecasts as well that were saying this was going to be a Category 4 at worst, and now it is a full-fledged Category 5, and it is borderline. Maybe we need to make a new category, because if it gets above 180, that's now we're getting into insane levels. And once again, what has happened? Climate change. We've turned the Gulf of Mexico into basically a hurricane incubator, and it goes in as a little lizard, comes out as Godzilla. There you go. It's that simple.
Something I was thinking about was Helene was, a week and a half ago?
Yeah.
So in that time, you also had the storms that started with I, J, K, and L all come through and burn off so you could get to Milton. And yes, I know this is peak hurricane season, but I'm like, you went from H to M in a week and a half.
Yep. And by the way, they showed the map where all those hurricanes and named storms were way out in the Atlantic. Thank goodness. But we're not even done with the hurricane season yet, man. We're not even close. We still got a few weeks left. Milton rapidly strengthened to a Category 5 Monday in the Gulf of Mexico on a path towards Florida, threatening a dangerous storm surge in Tampa. Now, they just had Helene just because of the way it hit down by Tampa and on that coast. There were tons of communities that were wiped out with this. Dear Lord. They're now putting in evacuation orders and long gas lines, leading more urgency to the cleanup of Hurricane Helene, which swamped the same stretch of coastline less than 2 weeks ago. They're saying basically these piles of debris that are there, if this thing is anywhere close to as strong as it is now, they're just basically going to become, that's going to be shrapnel. That's just going to tear through everything. So they got to get that stuff moved out of the way just in time for another big buildup. The hurricane warning was issued for parts of Mexico's Yucatan state, which is expected to get a side swipe of this storm. Much of Florida's west coast is under hurricane and storm surge watches. Florida's Lake Okeechobee, which often floods during intense storms, is also under a hurricane watch. There's going to be a hurricane on the lake. That'd be like having a hurricane on one of the Great Lakes, for God's sakes. Dear Lord. I've got friends, and there are people who are regular listeners to this show in Florida who are frantically scrambling, trying to figure out what's going to happen. They've got to get. I live in the upper Midwest. I live here for a reason. Like I said the last time there was a hurricane, when I was a kid, I went through a Category 1 hurricane in Rhode Island as a kid, and I'm not going through that again. I live in the upper Midwest to avoid hurricanes and earthquakes. Sorry, West Coast. No, Seattle, you're gorgeous. Mountains, parks, brilliant, absolutely spectacular. But shaky, and in your case of Washington, boom every once in a while. No, I'm not a big fan of that. So I like being in the upper Midwest. We don't even have it. We get snowstorms. And, of course, everyone here talks about the blizzard of 1991 that came in right before Halloween and basically left 3 feet of snow on the ground, and so it basically started winter off in Minnesota very early. And we talked about that, but it wasn't like we were all, there's going to be such a bad snowstorm that everyone has to leave. I can't even comprehend. And I know, like I said, a lot of people that are down there, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with their kids, where the schools are going to meet up, how are you going to, you have to worry about whether your house is going to be there. And then the same problem they had with Helene. Helene, you got literally like 90% of people whose houses were destroyed had no flood insurance. None. They're not going to get a payout. They're not going to get a dime. And Florida, we've already talked about the fact that Florida is, because it is storm central and it's right on that incubator coast, you can't even get homeowners insurance there unless you basically have to pay enough money to build another version of your house. That's the only way they'll insure your house in Florida. And the only people that can do that are the extremely wealthy. Funny, though, a lot of them don't. This is scary. This is scary. But, of course, I guess it's time for politics. Vice President Kamala Harris has been reaching out to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis as yet another hurricane is bearing down in his state. However, NBC reports that DeSantis has been blowing off her calls. One DeSantis aide who spoke to NBC said they did not want to take Harris's calls because they seemed political. Kamala was trying to reach out, and we didn't answer, the aide said. Oh, that's nice of you. The aide also said they had no knowledge of DeSantis talking with President Joe Biden, who reached out to the Florida governor last week without success. DeSantis has, however, been talking directly with the Federal Emergency Management Director, Deanne Criswell. DeSantis' apparent reluctance to speak with Harris comes at a time when former President Donald Trump has been lobbying multiple false claims about the Biden administration and its handling of Hurricane Helene, which caused widespread devastation throughout the southeastern United States. More than a week ago, among other things, Trump falsely claimed that Biden had refused to talk with Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, which is a lie, despite the fact that Kemp himself confirmed that he had personally spoken with Biden. This is Ron DeSantis here. And once again, a large portion, if this thing comes in at a 4 across with the storm surge, there's no height to Florida. If it rains like it did with Helene, Milton does that, if it comes through, it's going to scour a path clean across Florida. Ron DeSantis wants to play politics here. He doesn't want everyone involved because, let's be honest, he should probably talk to Joe Biden, if not Kamala Harris, because there's a decent chance Kamala Harris will be the president of the United States, and that cleanup's not going to be done in 3 or 4 months. This is going to be something that's going to have to be going on for a while. And I made a post this weekend on social media in regards to the lies that Republicans are telling about the relief and how in the areas that have been effective, northeastern Georgia, western North Carolina, where these are Republican bases, it's kind of waking a lot of Republicans up to the lies. They see the lies. They say, no, that's not happening. We know what's going on, and it's not happening that way. And yet, yeah, they keep telling these lies, and no matter what, just because it's about, they're taking this hurricane and trying to make it political. Kind of the same exact way they did with Ebola virus back in 2014. They don't care about actually helping anyone out. They only care about basically, trying to take tragedy and use it for their own bidding. But fine, I'll play this game because I don't have, I'm not in the hurricane's path here, nor am I work for the federal government. Ron DeSantis took state money in Florida to ship immigrant families from Texas to Martha's Vineyard in a political stunt which burned millions of dollars of taxpayer money from Florida on that little stunt. Ron DeSantis did that. And now this guy is going to have the audacity to look at us and say, we need help now. I'm sorry. If I was Joe Biden, I would want a handwritten, signed note saying you're not going to use any of this emergency relief money to send immigrants to Martha's Vineyard. And if he says, how dare you? I was like, no, we're just doing what you have done. You take taxpayer dollars and spend it on stupid stuff, on political maneuvers. And so you want money from FEMA, I'm more than happy to give it, but you're going to promise me that you're not going to use it to basically push a political agenda. And there are some people who say, well, Matt, that's kind of pushing a political agenda on Biden. No. That's called accountability. That's right. Accountability is only something that a lot of people care about when it comes to Democrats. But, frankly, the track record on DeSantis is that he should have some level of accountability either. That being said, I believe you help these people. That is a basic form of government. The Republicans don't. They look at, how did they vote? Did they vote for me? Well, then I'll help them. If they didn't, I'm not going to help them. But that being said, I believe they should help them because, at this point, Florida is just, anyone think this is going to be the last hurricane this year? It's the Matt McNeil Show.
I'm surviving alone. It feels good to see the world getting loose. Feels good to see the world getting loose.
It is the Matt McNeil Show. Good to have you with us today. 952-946-6205 is the phone number. By the way, one of the things that did happen this weekend in the Twin Cities is the Twin Cities Marathon. It happened on Sunday morning, a great marathon. My wife ran it one year, and that really hurt her bad. She hasn't done it again. But she did. She finished it. She has her medal. She has her poster from the race she did. Governor Walz, the vice presidential candidate for Kamala Harris, was at the marathon and waving. And one of the coolest things that happened were runners. Now, these are people who are obsessed with time. Stopped, came back, got selfies with Governor Walz, and kept running. So there you go. A pretty good thing. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Did you see Trump, speaking of presidential politics, did you see Trump's rally in Pennsylvania? First of all, he rambled. And just, his speeches are dark, man. But still, people were leaving, once again, early. I did love how the fire marshal announced the attendance was somewhere around 21,000. 21,000 people. And immediately every Republican screamed, 100,000 people were there. Dear Lord, you guys can't count, can you? You guys have some trouble with numbers, don't you? No, it was 21,000, which, by the way, a pretty good turnout. Now Donald Trump's starting to get rally sizes the size of Kamala Harris. Now that's good. Good for him. Good for him. But it's like, I mean, you guys, it does just not matter. You know, we have seen it in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Minnesota where he comes on out. And seriously, if more than 10,000 people showed up in some of these towns, it would absolutely wreck the town. I mean, there's just they couldn't survive it because it's not designed. It's a smaller town that's not designed for 20,000 people to be in it, and yet you guys are 100,000 people, more people than watched any college football game. No, it isn't. Anyway, his crowd included one specific lovable character, a man who I'm actually concerned if he's mentally unwell, and that's Elon Musk, who came out on stage and jumped around like a kid who found the candy bars his parents had stashed, and he'd eaten them all, and he was on a sugar high. And he doesn't really know how to interact with other human beings, does it? Is he an alien? Hello, human. Tell me, what is love? Yeah, is that who he is? It would explain a lot. He comes around, jumps around, looks like a freaking idiot. And yeah, he is. He is a freaking idiot. I've never seen anyone do more damage to his brand faster than this guy has. You know, his Twitter bought for $44 billion. I saw one recent thing. If it's worth $5 billion, they'd be surprised. It's just not making any money anymore. It's losing its appeal. I mean, as much as he says that there's interactions, a lot of those interactions are from troll farms, which clearly have taken that over. Tesla is having a lot of problems. Who would have ever guessed the guy who is dependent on liberals to buy his cars wouldn't understand that upsetting liberals might drive them away to another brand? So, you know, he's dying there. I mean, he's putting everything in SpaceX, but I still, for the life of me, I'm not exactly sure how he thinks he's going to eventually make money on SpaceX. But still. It does bring up a point, and I think this is something that I've been trying to figure out when to cut the cord in regards to Twitter. I, like many people, have multiple social media pages. My biggest is Facebook. I have no idea why, but 9,000 or so people are following me on Facebook. I got like 4,200 followers on Twitter. I also have, a nice little following on Threads, and Blue Sky and Mastodon are also there as well. So find your pleasure. But I think the days of me being on Twitter, they are, if they're not over today, I'm going to, by the end of this week, I don't think I'm going to be on it anymore. And I don't encourage you to be on it anymore if you're a sane human being. I just don't. And I get it. There are going to be Democrats out there like, Matt, we got to stay and fight. Fight what? All right? First of all, you're acting like it's the only front in this game. And the reality is most of the people who are like-minded like you, if you're a lefty, have already left Twitter. They're already gone. I get it. It's hard to cut the cord. You've got 80,000, 90,000, 100,000 followers. It's hard to say goodbye to that. But it ain't ever coming back. And if anything, I have noticed a dramatic increase in the Alpha Bro troll farm experience there. There was a hit piece some idiot did on Minneapolis talking about how bad it was. The guy basically had gone to he went to a specific set of sites to make Minneapolis look as bad as possible, And they went with a, see here, Minneapolis is in ashes. And it's not. It's delightful here, actually, by the way, FYI. It's absolutely magnificent. But it didn't stop him, and I called the guy out, and I spent a good chunk of my weekend dealing with these, 60, 70, 80 follower, spam bots on Twitter. It's not coming back. Civility, normalcy, it's not coming back. Only when Elon Musk sells it in shame at bargain basement prices. But at this point, I don't think, even if it was losing so much money he couldn't compete, I think he just shut it down as opposed to basically sell it and see someone else have success with it after he was done with it. I am tired of watching a guy who says he bought it because he wants to preserve freedom of speech constantly take down people's posts that are anti-Trump, take down anti-Republican posts, take down embarrassing stories for the Republicans, or just block people just out of blocking people. But it's one thing in particular about what he's planning now that I have found to be extremely... I have said he was initially saying he was going to get rid of the block feature, which means that every troll I've ever blocked would not be able to, or would be able to come back and come at me. Now, he realized when there was a massive exodus when he announced that was his plan that he couldn't do it. So he's now modified that, and he's saying that he's going to, you can block people, but they are still going to be able to see your posts. And I keep saying to myself, if I'm a woman who has restraining orders against people which she's blocked, this guy is basically encouraging stalkers to re-enter people's lives. And yeah, that is exactly who Elon Musk is. He's that freaking creepy. He is a creepo, man. And if you think I'm exaggerating, watch him jump around on that stage. Nope, I think the time for me to post on Twitter is done. And sometime this week, I'm going to completely and totally cut that cord, and I encourage you to do the same thing as well. It's the Matt McNeil Show. Broadcasting in the evenings on WCPT 820 Chicago's Progressive Talk. In the nighttime hours, 11:50 a.m. KKNW in Seattle. And, of course, live in Minneapolis, St. Paul on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. It's the Matt McNeil Show on your Monday. Nice to have you here today. 952-946-6205. So I mentioned that Trump is getting darker and less coherent. Trump's speeches have grown noticeably darker and less coherent. A New York Times correspondent, Peter Baker, has tracked his changing using statistics. The reporter conducted analysis of former presidents' rally speeches dating back to 2015 and found that they nearly doubled in length from 45 minutes 8 years ago to 82 minutes now, and they show clear signs of advancing age and diminished mental capacity. Wow, finally someone doing something about reporting equally about him as they did with Joe Biden when they went after him. It's not new that Donald Trump is a decisive speecher as he rambles and he says things that are outrageous, that he says things that are untrue, but he seems at times to be disconnected from the norms, the standards that we're used to, Baker told MSNBC. There is this debate that doesn't mean he's getting older or not. We did an analysis of all the rallies going back to 2015. I looked at many of them, not all of them, and we do see some changes. Yes, more accentive to the negative, more accentive to all or nothing wording like never, like always, more like, the swear words. Here is a funny statistic. He uses swear words 69% of the time more than he did in 2016. Well, no, that's just an elderly man who basically has lost any sense of decorum because they've gotten older. That's something that experts call disinhibition, where you lose your inhibitions and you get older, and that's probably here. We see speeches getting longer, more rambling. Baker added, they're nearly twice as long as they were in 2016. At the same time, he's doing far fewer of them. Does that mean he's tired? We don't know. Obviously, remember, he nodded off during a hush money trial. He's looking less like one quarter of the rallies so far this year than he did in 2016, so I think it's appropriate to look at age. Joe Biden dropped out of the race in July, a month after his disastrous performance during a debate against Trump highlighted concerns about his age and fitness to serve another term. Baker said it was fair to consider the same questions about the 78-year-old Republican nominee. Is it? Obviously, he doesn't have the same issues that Biden has. Biden presented very, old physically, right? He looked frail. He was having a hard time on that debate stage. We all remember that. Trump has different issues. He looks just as freaking frail. He does. I mean, there are some speeches where he doesn't look like he's going to be able to finish them. He obviously still exudes energy, and he's obviously as loud and bombastic, and that hasn't changed. But if you want his speech patterns and spend time watching these rallies and comparing them to the past, you can see some differences. Well, I think it is, yes, I'm glad the New York Times is finally starting to cover this as fervently as they covered Joe Biden. Now, will the New York Times have 16 stories a day about Joe Biden needs to go, Joe Biden's too old, Joe Biden is an old man, Joe Biden's this? No. They did this one, and this is the game they play. They did the one, it's like, well, we did this for both sides. Not nearly as intensely. And the reality is there are a lot of media outlets out there who were all in on going after Joe Biden who still have yet to mention anything about Donald Trump and his clearly, cognitive issues that he's having right now. It's frustrating to see this double standard play out yet time and time and time again. And here it is. Now, once again, I'm glad the New York Times did this, but where is the follow-up stories? Where is the above-the-fold big headline, Trump too old to be president? Because that's how you went after Biden. I will say, as you look at this election cycle, there are some things I have noticed that are positive. But once again, I'm going to say these things. I'm not saying we don't work our caboose off. We have to work our caboose off. That is a mandatory thing. But we do have a lot of things that you can feel somewhat confident about in regards to just numbers and statistics. And I have talked about this because I am a big numbers guy. I don't see how you can have polls right now in North Carolina showing the governor, who is wildly unpopular, the governor candidate for the Republicans, Robinson, who is so wildly unpopular that he's 17 points behind the Democrat, and yet Donald Trump is going to win that state by 2 points. I don't see how those numbers work. And of the two things that seem the most legit, it's the 17 points down for Robinson after he was found on porn website chat boards. That seems like the real legit deal. And I kind of keep looking at that number. I was like, I just don't see how 17 points is just going to get made up. 19 points, because he has to make up the 17 that he's behind, plus then 2 more points to get ahead. And I understand North Carolina runs a little more conservative, but it's not Wyoming. It's not Idaho. It's North Carolina, and it's a state that's been growing more and more competitive. So, I just, if that number is true, if that Robinson number is even close to being true, I mean, historically, will you have a gubernatorial or a Senate candidate that's 7, 8, 9 points under? Can you be on the top of the ticket and flip that over? Yes, you can do that. It's not normal, it's not common, but it's not historical out of line. Historically out of line would be like 10, 12 points. 17? 17, if Robinson loses by 17 and Trump is able to flip 19% of those voters over to him, I don't even see how that math is even possible. I just don't. In the same sense is that we hear a lot about the general election, and Harris leads in most polls in the general election. I think the average is by 3.3 points, which is pretty good. And there comes a point of how much can a candidate win the popular vote but still lose the electoral college? And this is just a numbers problem. And reality is up to about 3%. Up to about 3%, you can lose the general election but still win the electoral college. After that, it starts becoming an incredibly complicated math problem, which now we're getting into those historic levels, just one-timers that would be there. I don't see that happening. Plus, there is other information which is out there which shows you there seems to be, good positive signs for the Democrats. One of which is you look at the absentee ballots as they're coming in some of the states. And you look at Pennsylvania. And this is from Christopher Bosey, and he does some really good analysis. It's still early. Conditions on the ground may shift, but the current developments in Pennsylvania are eye-opening. As of today, 61.6% of absentee and mail-in ballots requested have come from Democrats, a significant figure that could indicate trends leading up to the election day. On top of that, Democrats aren't just leading in requested ballots, they're also leading in return ballots by a whopping 72.8% in Pennsylvania. This may indicate higher enthusiasm among Democratic voters compared to Republicans. However, it's possible these ballots are key counters that are still in transit. Doesn't mean that number is legit, but at the same time, it doesn't mean it's wrong either. And the situation for Republicans is even more dire. According to Target Smith's race modeling data, black voters represented just 8.8% of the Republican of the electorate, not Republican, 8.8% of the Pennsylvania electorate overall in 2020. However, that percentage has surged dramatically. Black voters now in Pennsylvania make up almost 20% of the vote, 19.5. And by the way, funny story, they overwhelmingly support Kamala Harris. Plus, you put in that the numbers that I saw today on MSNBC, or it might have been, I think it was MSNBC, it might have been CNN, I can't remember exactly. But one of their polling guys was talking about Harris's record number of white educated voters and her massive advantage she has, which is far exceeding Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden at the same time. And one of the things that was great was that they focused on the fact that this has been a growing demographic. Back in 1980, only 20% of the voters had a college education. Now it's 40-some% of the voters have a college education, and she is dominating within those numbers. And yes, the uneducated, the non-college educated voter still favors Trump because, that's who they're targeting. They're targeting the people who are easily manipulated. And so they're going after them. But it's not nearly as big as it's been in the past. Absolutely not. So Pennsylvania is good. I will say a thing about this Christopher Bosey. I've been reading up. He's been really following Florida. He was one of the first people I heard that said that watch Florida. Because Florida is not nearly as cut and dry as it looks. And there are some things with estimated mail-in ballots returned. The Republicans, 800 in 2024 estimated, this is going to be the estimated, 860,000. Democrat, 1,028,000. The estimated early in-person vote, Republicans, 1,477,000. Democrats, 1,723,000. Based on early voting data, I anticipate Democrats will have an advantage heading into Election Day. I estimate Trump will lose around 8% of his Republican support, while other voters will favor Democrats by approximately 58 to 60%. If this holds true, Trump will lose Florida. And he then comes back in with more eye-opening numbers, which show in Sumter County in Florida, that's where the Villages is at. That's where those elderly people that love Trump, that's where they're at. There has been this growing, very big, subtle shift from Trump to Harris in the Villages. And it is, if he can't hold Sumter County, he's in real big trouble in Florida. So Florida, pay attention. So there's a lot of things that, you can pay attention to. And I encourage you to pay attention to this. Because I think one of the reasons why Trump is getting darker and getting angrier and swearing more is because I think he sees the real numbers coming. And this is going to lead to a major problem within the Republican Party. If Donald Trump is defeated in this next month's election, this is from Axios, and I love this, the Republican Party will face a reckoning unprecedented in modern political history. Never before has a party's identity been so deeply intertwined with the fate, fortunes, and flaws of one man. 4 consecutive poor election cycles would unleash a wave of sustained scrutiny that the GOP, as it currently exists, may not survive. Right now, it's difficult to see through the November fog. Trump is laying the groundwork to deny the results of the election again, spreading a litany of baseless fraud claims in an anticipation of a potential defeat. Election challenges are inevitable. Republicans already have filed over 100 lawsuits. Voting results may not be finalized for weeks, if not for months. If Vice President Harris ultimately is inaugurated in January, a rudderless Republican Party will be forced at the time to move on from Trump, who has said he will not seek the 2028 nomination. Senator J.D. Vance gave us a window of the MAGA sans Trump could look like, presenting a polished case of economic populism without the cult of personality. But any ideological successor would face consequence challenges. Even the Trumpiest candidates have historically underperformed the former president. Those unique appeal to disaffected voters have proven hard to replicate. Anti-Trump Republicans, a cohort that swelled in the aftermath of January 6, are salivating at the prospect of reclaiming the party, including Nikki Haley, Liz Cheney. But given the years of hostility towards establishment Republicans, the probable entrenchment of pro-MAGA forces, even if Trump fades away, our most likely outcome is a deeply fractured party. I think the Republican Party is in big trouble. Because this group of people that likes Trump for who Trump is. And it has not. I mean, you've gotten some districts where a turnip with an R next to its name could win that district. Marjorie Taylor Greene. But, speaking of turnips. But, those districts aside, what has been driving this party is this allegiance towards Trump. And trust me, that coalition will collapse. There will be a power struggle about this. And you're going to get more and more people who are an extreme far-righters that are going to be, I'm the heir apparent to Trump. You're going to have the moderate traditional Republicans saying it's time to take back the party. And right now, I can't see that party surviving. It's going to be the Whigs 2.0, which technically would be the Republicans anyway. And I think there'll be a new party by the time it's all over. We all have to win in November. It's the Matt McNeil Show. Matt McNeil Show on your Monday, amigos. I did like this. I saw this post up there. At 40% voter turnout for Democrats, this is to Democrats. At 40% voter turnout, you lose. At 60% voter turnout, you win most of the time. At 65% of voter turnout, you win every time. At 70% voter turnout, you'll get a congressional majority and pass actual policies. At 80% voter turnout, you'll get a supermajority and pass everything: gun laws, banking laws, health care, abortion, enshrinement. Republicans only hold power because you let them hold power. That is true. 100%. And right now, a major part of the next few weeks should be making sure everyone's registered to vote, which, by the way, today is the last day you can register to vote in many states, particularly Republican states, for the upcoming election. And so, if you're listening to me at all right now, get out there and check. Make sure you're registered to vote. Everyone votes. Everyone votes. The only thing that's keeping Republicans in charge is Democrats not showing up and not voting. And right now, the motivation seems to be much more on the side of the Democrats. Funny story. So we were out. I was out this weekend at the Minnesota Arboretum, and you want to just. My wife is not a big politics person. She's not someone that lives and breathes politics a lot. She saw someone with a Harris Walls hat. And she says, "You go, girl." I'm like, "No, okay." Yeah, that's called motivated. And she's talking to everyone she knows about getting everyone to vote. You need to be doing the same. You need to be making sure everyone knows to vote. And I have friends who tell me, "Oh, I don't vote, man. I'm not big on politics. I just do my own thing." And hey, you can live in a world like that. That's fine. But the reality is if you want to be able to make sure you can still live in that vote and that world, you need to get out and vote for Kamala Harris. And that's just that. Trump, if you need a motivation for Trump to get out there and vote, let me give you two last stories here today. Former President Trump's comments on the one-year anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel stunned political onlookers on Monday. Trump repeatedly put the tragic events of October 7th, where at least 1,200 Israelis were killed and about 240 others were taken hostage, in the context of his political re-election campaign. I think Israel has to do one thing. They have to get smart about Trump, he told conservative Hugh Hewitt in an interview. I did more for Israel than anybody. I did more for the Jewish people than anybody. That's not reciprocal, as they say, not reciprocal. The former president told Hewitt he believes immigrants were murderers because they had, quote, bad genes. How Hitler of you, sir. Wow. Which critics that, yeah, it's interesting, this guy saying that all the Jewish people should be subservient to him, and then he turns around and cosplays as Hitler, for God's sakes. Critics have echoed the eugenics rhetoric of Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler used to justify his attempt to exterminate Jewish people. Trump also phoned into the radio show Sid and Friends to praise his own policies in support of Jewish Americans. Nobody's done more for Jewish people than I have. No person has ever been better to the Jewish people. Probably no person, period, the Jewish people in Israel. The Jewish Democratic Council of America responded to Trump's commentaries Monday with words of disgust. Wow, the political group wrote, Trump used October 7th to continue attacking Jewish Americans and Israelis who refused to support him. On this day of mourning and deep pain for Jews and Israelis, Trump finds a way to both attack us and make October 7th all about himself. It's absolutely disgraceful. Yep, I would agree. That is some freaking delusion right there. That is some freaking delusion. If you want another reason why you need to vote, is the world that now exists. On the first day of its new term, the U.S. Supreme Court, in an unsigned opinion, upheld a lower court ruling that enforces the Texas ban on certain emergency abortions. The Biden administration had sought to overturn the ban to enforce its policy, overturning hospitals to perform an emergency, potentially life-saving procedures. The court declined, allowing the Texas law, one of the strictest in the nation, to remain in effect. Now, this is going to be one of those things where the Supreme Court is going to sit there and argue, we didn't do anything. We just basically sent this back to the states. But the Supreme Court just had the opportunity to say, you know what? Yeah, we want to go back to the states, but life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, that means being able to live. And they basically just dictated that non-medical professionals can determine what medical procedures can and cannot happen, including life-saving medical procedures. That the mother of 5 kids who is pregnant with her 6th could be dying of the pregnancy, and they basically say, you know what? Nope, kill her. Let those 5 kids grow up without mom because Jesus. Yep. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, sounds like a legitimate argument to me. If this was a case about, male enhancement pills, the Supreme Court would be like, how dare you intercede between a man and his doctor? But it's about women and abortion, and yeah. We dare not get between those 2 bathtubs where those people are holding hands. That's between them and their spouse and the cliff that they're sitting on watching a sunset. The Biden administration had argued that hospitals have to perform abortions in emergency situations under federal law. The administration pointed to a Supreme Court's action in a similar case from Idaho early this year, which the justices narrowly allowed emergency abortions to resume when a lawsuit continues. The Associated Press reports doctors have said the Texas law remains dangerously vague after a medical board refused to specify exactly which conditions qualify for the exception. Pregnancy terminations have long been part of the medical treatment for patients with serious complications. To prevent sepsis, organ failure, other major problems, the AP added. But in Texas and other states with strict abortion bans, doctors and hospitals have said it's not clear whether those terminations can run afoul of abortion bans that carry the possibility of prison time. And trust me, there are people outside that hospital that have nothing to do with the doctor, the hospital, or the patient who are sitting there hoping they can sue a doctor and throw them in jail under the idea of Jesus. And there are plenty of politicians and law enforcement in Texas that want to. Sweet Jesus, why is anybody going to Texas right now? Seriously, why would you go to Texas? dear Lord. You want to know why you need to get registered to vote? You want to know why you need to vote? On one side, you have the candidate who is Captain Kooky, where he's basically trying to get the Jews to worship him and then quoting Hitler. And then you have Texas basically saying women don't have a right to life. Disgusting. Chicago, Seattle, talk to you tomorrow. Minneapolis, St. Paul, hour 2 up next. Hour number 2 of the show here. Matt and Patrick. I got to go on out to Fall Harvest Orchard yesterday, Patrick. This was really kind of I'm stocking up on apples trip. So I was pleasantly surprised that Tango Town was still open up. That's where they have an orchard of sweet tango apples, and that was still open, and I loaded up one basket just of those alone. My son, he likes the honey gold. Now, are you a green or yellow apple fan, or do you like a traditional red or red variety?
I'm kind of a sweet red guy.
All right. And good for you. My son, I don't know. I'm thinking of disowning him. Honey gold. He likes those yellow greenish ones. Now, they are tasty. I did have I must have had 9 apples yesterday while I was walking through the apple orchard. It's what you do. And it was a cool morning. You'd pick one off the line. It was fantastic. Now, I will say this about a Fall Harvest Orchard. Dude, that place is busy. And just in this out my Montrose, and just in the years that I have been going there, it has developed into this massively successful venture. But it is still good fun. They had one called Snow Sweet, an apple there. Now, I think that the name comes from, if you bit into it, the meat of the apple was really like white, like, Trump supporter white. I mean, it was really white. It was pretty delicious. Unlike Trump supporters, it was pretty delicious. It was pretty good. We also had, what was it, Fiestas? We got Fiestas. They were huge, man, but they were good too. Those I love it. And now I open up my fridge at home, and I'm overwhelmed with apple smell. Oh, man. If you want to appeal to me, get yourself an apple-based cologne. I am 100%. That or a biscuits and gravy one. Either one works. You'll have me wrapped around your little finger. Just delicious. I had a great time out there, and it's always good fun. I will say this, if you do want to go to that apple orchard, because there's so much fun things to do out there, we got there at 10:30, and we were like the last cars parked in the main parking lot and everything. Well, they opened at 10. They opened at 10. At 10:30, it was already full. It was amazing. I also went out to the Arboretum. A good time as always out there. If you've not gone out there and seen the pumpkin house they have and all the pumpkin decorations, that gets you into the fall spirit as well. The colors on the trees, not quite there yet. Next weekend, the weekend afterwards, they'll look great. But if you like dahlias, the dahlias absolutely are spectacular right now. I took a bunch of pictures. I'll share them through the week. I'll get them out there. It is fun time of year. I love October. October is just a great time of year. And I've got right now my apple spice tea. There you go. The only thing that would ruin this is a fairly disturbing story that contradicts pretty much most of the narrative that Republicans like to push nowadays. What? There you go. A Blaine woman has pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting 2 15-year-old hockey players from Colorado at a hotel in Roseville. Note, not a drag queen. Allison Chardon, 39, entered a guilty plea on Friday to a third-degree criminal sexual conduct charge on Friday, with a charge of fourth-degree criminal sexual conduct dropped as part of the plea deal. According to the criminal complaint, Chardon met the victims at a Roseville hotel room on January 14th. Both boys were part of a hockey team visiting from Colorado, with Chardon meeting them in the hotel hot tub, where she told them about her marital problems. Oh, God. The charges state that later that night she messaged one of the boys on Snapchat, asked him to come to her room. Once inside, Sheridan asked two of the boys sexual questions, remarking that they were young enough to be her kid. Yikes. Sheridan then allegedly had sexual contact with the boys, with one victim stating she'd been insistent on having sex. She texted one of the victims the next day and asked where they were playing hockey to showing up at the rink. A short time later, all the boys became nervous at her attempts to follow them, one victim saying it was really creepy. Once the team returned to Colorado, Sheridan continued to text the two victims, asking one of them not to contact police. Police were finally notified in the incident on January 22nd. Sheridan was arrested on February 1st, telling police that she'd gone to the hotel for a staycation with her family. Her next court appearance will be on January 10th at 9 p.m. She was on her staycation with her husband and kids and did this. Yeah, she's horrible. She's horrible. And I've already seen some people implying that this is somehow not bad for the boys, that somehow this was some sort of, a good thing. No, they were sexually assaulted. They will be dealing with that for the rest of their lives. This woman was basically following them around, threatening them in a way, for sure. But I want to make sure we say this. This is a suburban housewife from Blaine. This is not a drag queen or someone who's transgender. And as you guys, and I have said this, and I will continue to say this about Republicans, as you guys become so convinced and so hyper-focused on finding the narrative validation that you guys want to push with this stuff, you ignore the actual criminals committing the behavior you are insistent that you are there to stop. Hey, how about Donald Trump being on Jeffrey Epstein's child sex plane, going to his child sex island multiple times with underage kids on the plane with him at the times? I know if you look and see reality, it's pretty disturbing what you're following. But here you are, and you couldn't be prouder, you couldn't be happier that you've convinced yourself that this is the only problem. And reality is that these people are out there, and it is horrible. It is horrible. But if you want to really stop this, we'll start with your own presidential candidate and say, you know what? That's a deal breaker for me. I'm not going to vote for you because you are on Jeffrey Epstein's child sex plane to his child sex island multiple times. That should be a deal breaker. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. I want to talk a little bit more about the Republicans and Twitter particularly, and the trolls that are out there that try to portray Minneapolis as some sort of godforsaken hellscape, blah, 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 blah. It's not true. I noticed a certain trend of the trolls. Now, in case you missed the story, last week we were talking, this guy came on out, some right-wing guy came on out and did a tour of Minneapolis to see all the bad things that had happened in Minneapolis, why Minneapolis was so bad. Oh, my God, horrible, horrible, horrible. And what they had done is cherry-picked the worst visual spots in the city they could imagine and film them to portray them as this is the city now. Did they go down to the Sculpture Garden? No. Did they go down to the riverfront? Did they go to the North Loop? Did they go down to Lynn Lake? Did they go down? Nope. Did they go to the University of Minnesota campus into Dinkytown? Nope. They didn't go around places. They basically went out and found very specific sites to create a narrative and push that narrative Liz Collins style from Alpha, where it's just basically hating on the city. I'll get back to Liz here in a sec. But it was interesting to see the amount of people chiming in that, no, it's the worst place ever. Now, some of them were stupid enough to inform me that I live in Iowa. Yes, Iowa, that Iowa. There is not a suburb named Iowa now in the metro area. And if it was, it would be a suburb. It's not like there's a neighborhood, Iowa Flats or something like that in Minneapolis. There's not. But they would say that it's so much worse. I'm like, yeah, I'm not, impress me with your knowledge of the Twin Cities, Iowa boy. Please. I'm down there all the time. I am down there all the time. And the city is magnificent. There were some people who were like of the mindset of, there's two ways they went about it. The first where there were people that this is my daily existence. The first thing I have to do is clean off all the feces off the sidewalk outside my apartment because everybody goes by, just goes to the bathroom right there. I don't think that's true. I would make an argument that you might want to get some cameras and call the police at that point if that's the case. But this is how they're saying it, that this is their daily existence. Then they see people shooting up drugs everywhere they go, getting panhandled everywhere they go. They basically can't do anything, and then they better get home before a certain time or else I'm going to get robbed. That's every day for them. And now, if that is what you are experiencing, I want to say this from the bottom of my heart. Lee, for God's sakes, bad news is following you, dude. You need to get the heck out of Dodge because the fates hate you. Most people don't have that experience in Minneapolis, St. Paul, but somehow, some way, every day your life is a complete and total disaster. So, yeah, I'd skedaddle out of town if I were you. Clearly, they were making it up. I was murdered 16 times today. Sure you were. Tell me where the Canadian girlfriend hit on you. Sorry. Here's the other side of that equation. Is if you don't know the history of this city, don't try to talk authoritatively about somebody who knows a lot about the history of this city. Me. The people that would make the argument that kind of like Easter parade, that not long ago, that women put on their hoop skirts and men put on their three-piece tuxes and top hats and would stroll up and down the streets of the city just meandering and, hello, good neighbor, that this is how somehow this was the existence there. Now, mind you, I'm going to guess even in their world that there weren't any minorities, but still, this is the image that they have. That, Matt, this city used to be so sterling and there wasn't a bad part of it, and now today, look at it. Okay. I grew up in my high school days in this city. I explored this city. Like I said, the no skateboarding signs that were down at the Hyatt for many years, guilty as charged. That was me and my friends. We used to hang around in the downtown a lot, and I can tell you right now, Nicollet Mall, Uptown, and depending on if it was game day or not, around the old Metrodome were pretty much the only places that were safe in the entire downtown. I remember when they wanted to build River Place across the river in St. Anthony, Maine, and everyone's like, why would you ever do that? They weren't saying that because they thought there was undeveloped territory there. They were saying that because they didn't feel it was safe. This was not yesterday. This was back in the 1980s. The Nicollet Mall was what did Nicollet Mall in. I mean, people's like, Dayton's closed. Like somehow George Floyd had something to do with Dayton's closing. No, Dayton's closed because retail market, changed. I mean, you want to understand where the beginning of the end for Nicollet Mall was. Look at the Dales. Rosedale, Ridgedale, Southdale, and at one point Brookdale. The Dales, I mean, that was one thing that a lot of people weren't happy with. Then they opened the Mall of America, and then the internet came about, and guess what? High-end retail took it in the trousers. That had nothing to do with Minneapolis, had nothing to do with anything. That just is the way we changed. And if you got a box from Amazon today, you're part of the problem there. That's why Dayton's doesn't exist anymore downtown. It was expensive. It was expensive to rent the building, and they just weren't seeing the people that are coming through. Like a lot of places. Like I said, the aforementioned Brookdale. So they want to make an argument, and the argument comes down to, basically boils down to, Nicollet Mall is no longer the sterling jewel it was. And I admit, during the holiday season, Nicollet Mall was spectacular. The windows were very pretty. Holidazzle was great. But you couldn't go down Hennepin Avenue. Not with any kind of consistency. I remember when they built Butler Square, and people thought they were crazy to build Butler Square off First Avenue. No one's over there. That's an empty. Why would you renovate an empty warehouse building? I remember restaurant after restaurant failing, trying to establish themselves off of Hennepin Avenue because no one wanted to go down there. They deemed it too dangerous. That wasn't yesterday. That wasn't since George Floyd. That was back in the 1980s. Do you remember how the entire northern part of downtown was all freaking parking lots? Where all those residential apartments are. With all those residential apartments, the Guthrie Theater, the Mill City Museum, the train station, or the former train station they've renovated there. All of that there was pretty much empty freaking parking lots, man. No one was down there. Hardly anyone lived down there. God, when I was going to college in the 90s, I had a friend that lived down there. I was like, wait a minute, people live in the downtown? There was like 7 or 8, it seemed like 7 or 8 apartment complexes downtown. That was about it. No one lived down. No one wanted to build a grocery store downtown. They finally did, and now all of a sudden you can't build grocery stores fast enough because you got so many people in the downtown. North Loop, Washington Avenue. Now they're thinking about renovating some of the business office buildings. And yes, office space has taken a hit, but it's taken a hit everywhere because the pandemic changed everything. But still, there's a heck of a lot of traffic coming into Minneapolis, St. Paul on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Fridays. Well, maybe not so Fridays, and a little less on Mondays. But Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, my God, the traffic is as a traffic reporter, the traffic is just as bad now as it was back then. It is. So people are back downtown. Don't sit there and say, it's a ghost town, it's horrible, all these. No, you don't even know what the hell you're talking about. I know this is hard for a lot of people to accept, but right now is the best time Minneapolis has ever had. You go back to the 1930s and the amount of homeless people in the downtown where there's the beer bottles and liquor bottles that would line the park on Gateway Park. The flop houses. God, it was a pit, man. It was a freaking pit. You have residential, you have a lot of great restaurants, you have a bustling downtown nightlife. Now you've got the Target Field, you got Target Center, you got the new U.S. Bank Stadium. There's tons of things to do downtown nowadays. So you sitting and trying to make it's like, it's the worst it's been. Dude, if you don't know the freaking history of this town, then shut up. Because you don't know what the hell you're talking about. No, right now, Minneapolis is probably the nicest it's ever been to live in. Now, you can find an individual who I disagree with it. And if it's one of those people that sits there and say, every crime in the city happens to me every day. Well, if you're not lying, which I think you're lying, but if you're not lying, you need to move because, dude, I don't know what spell or voodoo magic or whatever happened to you, but you got a bad day coming. But don't try to play off to me that you know the city, and it's so much worse now when you don't even understand how bad it was. God, I remember my parents just chewing my caboose out when I said I went down to Schindler's down on, on Hennepin and 7th. I went down there to get comic books. Maybe some porn. No, just comic books and any music magazine that had Rush, the Canadian band, on it. That was me. That was my wheelhouse right there. You went down there? Yeah. Dear God, do you still have all your kidneys? Yes, I have all my kidneys. I didn't realize how dangerous it was. But now I look around in this city, the Renaissance is here. One thing, I'll tell you what, I'm going to take a break. When I come back, I just want to say one thing to people that just, this is their professional job, is to hate on the Twin Cities. And this is all you want to do. I'll come back to that here in just a second. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205. It's the Matt McNeil Show on your Monday.
You running across my mind. I was twisted, I was over it.
AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, the Matt McNeil Show. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205 is the phone number. I wanted to the people out there that hate the Twin Cities, and this is what your life is. I want to just ask you, what is your what's your thought process going to be here? I mean, what is your goal? Seriously, what's your goal? Do you think that tomorrow everybody's going to move out of the city because this person said everything was horrible, and now we're all leaving, and it's just going to be an empty, like, Omega Man downtown or something like that, man? That's not going to happen. Not in your wildest dreams. That is just not going to happen. I get it. What you're doing is creating narrative content for people that want to hate the Twin Cities, in the sense being, and I talked about this before, this rural and urban divide, where the people in rural America like to think about, they get bad-mouthed all the time by those urban people. No, they don't. They don't. Rural people, I've lived in rural America, they constantly bad-mouth metro areas, because I think part of it's frustration of watching all the high school kids move out of town, and they don't come back, and there's just not any opportunities, and Republicans have sure screwed them over as far as quality of life in rural America, and so they're looking for someone villain, and so they look at Minneapolis, St. Paul, or they look whatever major metro areas around them, and they blame that. And that's part of the case. Part of it's just plain old-fashioned racism and bigotry. Those people are there, that sort of thing. But, you're creating narrative content for people that want to hate the Twin Cities. And fine, you make a few bucks, knock yourself out. I think to a point, and I brought this up in regards to Bob Kroll and Liz Collins, I think part of I think it's hard for them to see the city vilify the Bob Kroll era of policing as much as it has. And so it is a little bit more personal, I think, there, that how dare you, the spurn lover, how dare you not love us back, sort of thing. That's kind of how I get it. But I want to just, for all of you people, I just want to ask you what you think your legacy is going to be. I mean, do you think that someone's going to put up a statue of you in the city, or even in the suburbs, or out in rural America, that there's going to be a statue to you because they just sit there and badmouth the city and we love that? No. You'll retire, or God forbid, and hope it's a long ways away, you pass away. But when that does eventually happen, no one's going to care about you. Well, at least the people that you're appealing to are going to see it, because they're only looking for knee-jerk content that validates their current narrative. And when you're not there, they will find somebody else to fulfill that role, and they will forget you. How many Republicans today talk at all about Rush Limbaugh? They don't. Why? Because he was only there to create a narrative validation, and once he left, basically, they didn't care. They just wanted the narrative validation. So right now, the haters, they get loved by these people that want to hate. But your long-term memory, no one is going to spend millions of dollars rejuvenating your image after you're gone. You're going to end up being like, if you go to like European villages, there'll be some story of in 1400 there was a witch who lived in the town who tormented everybody until all the children threw scones at her. And they'll have a festival every year where someone comes dressed up like the witch and they all chuck scones at her. It's Europe. That's what they do over there. But that's going to be you. That is going to be you. This person was known for their irrational hatred of Minneapolis that was not based on anything but wanting to hate on the city. And that's what your legacy is going to be, because no one is going to be spending money to make sure your legacy stays that way. And we already are kind of torturing and tormenting you guys for your irrational hatred. And I get it. This is your bread and butter. This is how you make money. You create narrative content for the people that want to hate on the cities. Fine. No one is going to care about you after you are gone, whether that's you retired or you eventually pass away, hopefully in a long time. But no one's going to care about you. No one's going to care about your issues or what you tried to do. You yourself will say, well, I made a difference. No, you didn't. No one is going to remember you. They just won't. And you're more than likely going to be that there's an evil witch we need to throw scones at sort of thing. You know, you're like Doc Ames or something like that, the crooked police chief who, no one wanted to speak against when he was alive, but the minute he was gone, all of a sudden everyone's like, he was horrible. Nobody remembers Doc Ames in a positive light anymore. So your little niche of history is secure. And as much as you think you're making a difference, all you're doing is basically hating for hate's sake. And good luck with that. That's something that's going to basically age you quicker, and that's not good for you. But if you think at some point, some way, the city of Minneapolis it's going to be like the end of the Blues Brothers where you win over the crowd, that's not going to happen. Not for you. Because as opposed to a statue honoring you, there's going to be much more likely a festival where kids are chucking scones. Let's just be honest about it. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205. Hundreds of years in the future, there were these old people that used to just rail against the city. They'd sit outside the city walls and go, blah, 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 blah. Grab the scones, kids. Oh, Europe. It's not hard to see why you guys constantly have problems over there. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. We'll take a break, come on back. It's the Matt McNeil Show here on Monday. I always did like Mad King Ludwig's celebration. When I was in the military in Nuremberg, they had a celebration where they celebrated Mad King Ludwig, who was nuts, man. That dude was cray-cray. He forced the people of Nuremberg to build these tunnels, basically dig tunnels through solid rock underneath the castle. And they basically, there's this horrible thing they did today. What they do is have a brewery down there, and it's called the Altstadtbrau. And the Altstadtbrau in Nuremberg, Germany, could be the greatest beer I've ever had in my life. It is spectacularly delicious. But they do, and so they honor this guy who basically did this by basically, they make mockery of him. They kind of talk about how crazy he was, and they drink the beer that's now made in the place, his death tunnels that he did out there. So, good quality family fun. But that's how they remember people. I mean, there's a lot of people on the right who think we're going to do like they did with Reagan, or they're going to do like Reagan. Because when Reagan left office, people don't remember. Reagan left office, he was wildly unpopular. And out of a fear of when George H.W. Bush did not resonate like Reagan did, they went and rehabilitated. They spent millions of dollars rehabilitating Reagan's image. And it worked. And it's something that has driven the Republicans ever since, is like, who's going to be the next Reagan? Who's going to be the next Reagan? Until we got to Trump. And now it's who's going to be the next Trump. And the reality is that Trump has killed the Republican Party because they just became enamored with the image. Well, they did that for Reagan. They're not going to do that they're not going to do that for anyone else. And sure not some person who sits around and said, here's the brave soul who basically did 19 tweets a day about how much Minneapolis St. Paul sucks. No one's building you that statue. And as a matter of fact, there's a much better chance that your house will be featured on a haunted house tour in 100 years than anyone will remember you for anything positive. So, good luck with that. That's your legacy, man. I take pictures. I've got calendars. I got 3 kids. I try to have a good time. I love my city. I'm not living someplace I chronically hate, or I pretend to chronically hate just to make a few bucks off of people who do chronically hate it. Speaking of chronic hate, the Republican Party of Minnesota. More than 50 Republican state legislators sent Governor Tim Walz a letter on September 30th requesting he take action against a state employee. This comes after the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources employee posted it. Too bad they weren't a better shot in their personal Facebook account following a July 13th assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. Now, I'll just say this from the get-go. Yes, that's horrible. That is horrible. There is no place for encouragement or talk of this kind of behavior. None whatsoever. Just none whatsoever. And, I can't condemn it with the harshest terms. Now, as I'll say that, we're going to come back to that point in just a little bit. On July 26th, several legislators asked Walz to take action against the employee, but the legislator says Walz didn't address the situation, and with his new letter, legislators are asking Walz to take action. Your refusal to act as governor is troubling, especially in light of the growing public demand for the political violence to end. Not by addressing this situation are you failing to act in the interest of people of Minnesota who seek peaceful political disclosure without fear of violence. Okay, the Minnesota DNR previously posted on social media condemning the incident, calling the employee's statement reprehensible and inconsistent with the DNR's values and views. It also said the Minnesota Data Practices Act limits the agency's ability to comment further on the incident. A spokesperson from Walz's office directed the St. Cloud Times, part of the USA Today network, to the DNR in turn and said the department is actively investigating the employee's post. Legislators were worried about the precedent this would create for public employees, especially in light of recent acts of political violence. Since the DNR is a public entity rather than a private business, University of Minnesota professor in law Charlotte Garden, J.D., tells the St. Cloud Times there are additional legal factors at play when considering disciplinary measures. We're talking about the First Amendment because this is a public employer, and obviously the First Amendment does not apply to private employers. Garden says private employers have fewer constraints if they decide to want to fire somebody because of something they've said at work. Garden said in the case similar to 1987 Rankin versus McPherson, a case where a county employee in Texas said if they won't go for him again, I hope they get him after a failed assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. A coworker overheard the comment, reported it, leading to the employee being fired. The Supreme Court ruled that while direct threats to a person's life would not be considered protected speech, comments on the matter of public interest spoken by an employee with no policymaking functions and public interaction would be protected under the First Amendment. Garden said the 1987 case posed 2 questions. Is the comment a matter of public opinion, and did the comment impact the functionary of the office? In the similar comment made following the Reagan assassination attempt, providing opinion and comment on the assassination attempt was deemed a matter of public interest by the court. However, Garden said how the comment would impact the function of the department, which the DNR in this Minnesota instance can vary from case to case. Sometimes a statement by the employee really does make it difficult for a public employer to continue to function efficiently. An example of the court would think about it would be a comment diminished public trust in the agency. Despite these potential legal implications, those signing the letter say there are still actions Walz can take. There's no law prohibiting the governor from calling for an employee's resignation, calling out an employee's behavior or performance, or otherwise commenting on actions of state employees, unless you want to get into the legal, mess of. Because I mean, if he's you say he can just call for his resignation. He's the head of the government. The DNR is part of the government. That would be calling for his resignation without these legal aspects being addressed. If you don't understand that, then you probably shouldn't be sending this letter. Now, once again, atrocious, undeniably. You've got too much hate in your heart. But I do want to make sure I go back to what they said. You are, too bad, let's see, what was it here? By not addressing the situation, you're failing to act in the interest of the people of Minnesota who seek peaceful political discourse without fear of violence. They are sending this letter. They sent this letter on September 30th. Mind you, after we found out about Minnesota Representative Jeff Dotseth of Kettle River, who, if I can, I'll just reread from the story from a few weeks ago, because not a single Republican has said this guy should resign. Now, I want to say for the record that I have, when we had the senator that had the issues up north with breaking into the, allegedly breaking into the mother-in-law's house, I said they probably should need to resign. I have said that, this guy here, I just condemned him in the harshest terms, indeed. But you need to have some level of consistency, and as you're talking about inciting violence, let me tell you about one of your own representatives, Jeff Dotseth of Kettle River. He called his then stepson Kunta Kinte after the enslaved African character of Roots, and Dotseth also allegedly kicked and punched the family's 14-year-old dog, according to an affidavit of his wife. Now, once again, he was not proven not guilty in court. Dotseth had these sworn affidavits against him. He pled to a lesser charge because basically, I'm pretty sure his lawyers advised him, you're not going to win this court case. So these affidavits are still out there, and no, he has not been found not guilty of these affidavits. He pled to a lesser charge. He screams that these are mischaracterizations, but the reality is these affidavits are there. The Star Tribune reported on parts of the affidavits about serial domestic abuse that led to his 2008 arrest and a year-long order prohibiting Dotseth from contacting his then-wife, Penny Dotseth, who now goes by Penny Cowell. He was also barred from using and possessing firearms and only granted supervised visits with their daughter. The Penny basically filed for divorce in 2007 in a blistering sworn affidavit described years of physical abuse. The son also filed an affidavit detailing the abuse. Following the Star Tribune story, Democratic leaders called on Dotseth to suspend his re-election campaign, asked for the House Republicans to expel him from his caucus. Because, reminder, they don't tolerate violent rhetoric. They don't. That's what the Republicans say. They don't. This violence out there, this person making a Facebook post on their private Facebook page, that is a bridge too far. For goodness sakes, that person needs to go. Mind you, there's a guy with sworn affidavits that he was beating his wife and he was being abusive to the kid and being abusive to the dog. And not a single damn Republican has had the guts to say, you know what, maybe that guy shouldn't be there on the ballot. So pardon me if I do not take the seriousness of this Republican's letter with any grain of salt. Because until you guys say something about Dotseth and saying, you know what, maybe, just maybe a guy with sworn affidavits about his abuse should not be a sitting member of the House of Representatives, I'm not going to sit there and go for your outrage bait. Like I said, I don't have the hypocrisy. I can criticize the DNR guy in the same sense as I criticize Dotseth. It's that simple. This Christmas, our dog Misty, who is 14-year-old, grabbed a small candy bar from one of Jeff's bags he had sitting by the floor. Misty came to our kitchen, looked at her, and said, "What do you have in your mouth?" Jeff was there, and he'd seen her candy bar and punched her and was yelling at her to let go. He hit her again. The daughter saw this. He was saying, "Dad, stop. She's old. If the dogs are in his way, he'll kick them to get out of his way." That's from the sworn affidavit. Cowell's son has a sworn affidavit that said that he and Dotseth would get into fights about his views on slavery. Cowell's son is not Dotseth's biological son, according to the son's affidavit. The reformer did not name him. But reminder, this child, who is now in his 40s, does not want to be seen. He still is scared of Dotseth. He is still scared of him. We figured this out. I mean, I think we figured out that this kid's probably close to 40 years old at this point. Dotseth would say things like, "If slavery was still around today, I would have slaves," the son told in the affidavit. I hated this because it showed his lack of care of humans and the basic freedoms. It often referred to as Kunte Kinte in a joking manner. I felt like it was always more than a joke. Of course, Kunta Kinte was a character in Roots who was kidnapped from Gambia and sold into slavery in the United States. Dotseth, in his sworn affidavit, denied the unfounded allegations. In her affidavit, Cowell said she and Dotseth would frequently discuss divorce, but those conversations would turn into arguments. She said in one episode, Cowell said Dotseth put his fist in her face when she wished she was dead, told her she wished he was dead and that she was a horrible wife. Dotseth at the time had lots of guns. He's just a horrible individual. But, Lisa DeMuth, who, once again, is the GOP House leader, she said, we had a talk, and I draw the line at spousal abuse, but clearly I'm going to jump over that line now. That line doesn't exist anymore. Seriously, I don't want to hear it about the DNR guy from one single Republican and news media of the Twin Cities. Hi. When are any of you going to bring this letter up to them and ask them in the same breath, well, do you condemn Representative Dotseth for the affidavits of spousal abuse, child abuse, pet abuse, and the whole slavery thing? Do you condemn him and ask him to step aside as well? And prepare yourself for no comment or I don't know anything about that case. Well, you should educate yourself about that case because it's within your own party and he's horrible. Allegedly. Or they'll sit there and say, well, it doesn't matter what he did then. This guy on the DNR on his private Facebook post, he's Satan. That's probably what they're going to say. But at least you should get them on record saying, hey, how can you be like this with this guy at the DNR if not a single damn one of you freaking cowards can't condemn Dotseth? How come you cowards can't condemn Dotseth? I don't know. Should be pretty easy for the party that is. Well, then, pardon me a second. Let me scroll back up here. They want to be free of a fear of violence. Yeah. Or are you expecting the DFL to win the House again so they can deal with this issue as they probably should? 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. We'll take a break. Come on back. It's the Matt McNeil Show here on the Monday. AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, the Matt McNeil Show. 952. I mean, this is just the hypocrisy of you guys on the right. I mean, okay, your U.S. Senate candidate said that the World War II was won by the bad guys. The bad guys won that war. Then he basically talked about how slave owners were somehow the persecuted minority in the Civil War. And once again, not a single one of you cowards had... Okay, I get you guys aren't talking about him now, but at what point do you sort of say, I wish he would withdraw from the race? Dear God, it's hilarious the stories I'm hearing now of the verbal gymnastics that Republicans in the suburbs are trying to put forward of, I'm a vicious independent. Bull crud. The Republican Party of Minnesota, I got Broadcourt's going to come on and talk politics this week on Friday. The Republican Party of Minnesota, do you remember when, 4 Republicans voted with the Democrats to pass the bonding bill? And Tim Pawlenty went on a personal attack to get those politicians out because how dare you betray the loyalty of the Republican Party over the state? Do you remember when Jensen had to vote against his own diabetes bill to prevent it from passing because the Republicans did not want anyone having unique individual spirit? There was no vicious independence within the Republican Party. You are told how to vote, and you vote that way. That is what your party is today. That's all your party is today. There's no integrity with Republicans. I've talked about your massive failures out in rural Minnesota where you consistently fail your own constituents over and over again, 50 years of failure. But here you guys are talking about it. And once again, what this guy said at the DNR, truly atrocious. Yeah, there should be some consequences. I'll let the legal system play out. But the reality is I can say that with a conscience because I can look at Dotseth, a guy with sworn affidavits about spousal abuse, child abuse, pet abuse, and a history of pro-slavery statements, allegedly, and say, boy, that guy probably should not be in the Minnesota House of Representatives. You guys can't because there's an R next to his name. Or the officer, and I can't remember his name, the guy from Elk River, who was apparently one of the arresting officers to Dotseth. He arrested him for this and has not said a damn thing about it. Not a damn thing about it. Not a condemnation. He knew he had arrested the guy and knew these allegations were out there, said nothing about it. But now all of a sudden, DNR employee, you got the guy up in Bemidji who apparently was lying to a judge, or that sounds like what was happening. You guys can party because your outrage meter only kicks off when there's a Democrat involved and when you have Republicans who say and do things which are 1,000 times freaking worse than any Democrat. You guys can't pucker up fast enough, man. So when you look at me and say Dotseth needs to resign, then I'll take your outrage over the DNR guy a little more seriously. Until that, the hell with you. You guys don't seem to have any integrity whatsoever. Native Roots Radio is up next. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, see ya.